tablets, laptops, and cameras.
Sorry. There are many amazing ensemble comedies out there, but Brooklyn Nine-Nine might just be the best. Don't yell at us, The Office fans. Okay, it's one of the best. Better? While we personally have rewatched the entire thing all the way through more than once, for those who haven't, there are some pretty awesome things that you might not have even noticed. One of the things you hear the most in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is the Squad's chant of, well, 9-9, almost always led by Terry. While it would make a lot of sense that this would have been going on in the precinct for a long time as a way to motivate everyone, its origins actually didn't come out of the 9-9 writer's room. Terry Crews himself came up with the chant, which he used as a way to pump up the cast before long days of shooting. The writers of the show quickly caught on and started including it in the episodes. And now, we can't imagine a day at the 99th precinct without it. Jake and Amy's romantic relationship was always a thing from the very beginning. While it started out as a bet, it seemed inevitable that the two opposites would eventually attract. They're a truly adorable couple, and one little detail makes the whole thing even cuter. In the episode Halloween, we can see a framed picture of Jake and Amy on Jake's desk. What you might not know is that it's a real picture of the two actors goofing around on set, pulled straight from Melissa Fumero's Instagram, which somehow makes the photo on Jake's desk even better. For those hoping that the Jake and Amy romance might have made it off screen, we're sorry to disappoint you, but both actors are already married to other people with families of their own. But Melissa's family has actually made it onto Brooklyn Nine-Nine more than once, in ways you might not have expected. In Season 3, she became pregnant and spent most of the season trying to cover it up with clever costumes. But by the end, it was impossible to hide, so the writers added the storyline where she pretends to be pregnant in order to go undercover in a women's prison. That way, we never had to go without Amy on our screens, and luckily her third trimester lined up at the end of the season so she could go off and take care of her family during the break. We did say that her family has made it onto the show more than once, and we weren't lying. In real life, Melissa is married to actor David Fumero, who she met shooting the ABC soap opera One Life to Live. The writers behind Brooklyn Nine-Nine just couldn't help but bring on David for one amazing cameo, which only reveals itself as a cameo after you realize just who he is. He came on to play ridiculously attractive crossword puzzle writer and part-time bathing suit model Vin Sturmley for the episode The Puzzle Master.
Just curious, would you say you have the typical physique of a puzzle maker, or...?
Now, Captain Holt might be one of the best bosses in all of TV history, and in real life. While he did take a few episodes to warm up, the character has seriously come into his own over the past seasons, and is now everything.
Do you want to know how I actually hurt my wrist?
Yes.
I was hula hooping.
He still might keep his emotions in check most of the time, but he leaves subtle clues around the office that reveals his playful and proud self. Take, for example, the stack of binders he has in his office, arranged in the colors of the rainbow pride flag. And if that wasn't awesome enough, Gina has the same arrangement of binders on her desk as well.
You helped me find my smile.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine takes its characters' off-screen lives very seriously and makes sure that when they change something in them, they stick to it. You might remember that all the way back in Season 1, Holt wound up with a pair of puppies that he was trying to unload on someone. Just as Charles was returning to the precinct from an injury, Holt wound up giving him the puppies in order to make him happy. Well, in the episode from Season 2 where Jake is trying to conceal the fact that Terry is going to have another baby by paying back everyone what he owes them, Charles shows up with the now fully grown dogs for Jake to wash. In another moment of masterful continuity that also weirdly relates to Charles, we see a treasured possession of his change hands. Poor Charles has had a bit of a rough go when it comes to his romantic life, and until a few seasons ago went through more than one breakup, which he didn't exactly handle in a very subtle way. There does seem to be one common thread that runs through all of his breakups, however, and that is his food dehydrator. We first see Vivian give it back to him when they split up, and then again when he and Gina and their whatever it was. We see her hand it back to him at the precinct, symbolizing the finality of her decision. The show has been known to borrow details from the actors' lives in order to make their characters as true to life as possible, like the fact that Jake and Gina grew up together. What you might not have known is that Andy Samberg and Chelsea Peretti actually did know each other all the way back in elementary school, and not just as passing acquaintances either. They were really good friends. Based off of an amazing photo of the two of them together in the car on their way to their 6th grade graduation, the two have been good pals for decades now. Another aspect of the show pulled from an actor's real life is the fact that Terry Crews is actually a really great artist in his own right. We see Sergeant Terry showing off his painting and drawing skills multiple times over the seasons of the show, whether it's drawing pictures for his daughters or sketches of perps, and real-life Terry has shown off his skills on late-night shows. He even had a job as a courtroom illustrator for a while before he landed his thriving career as an actor, giving him some real first-hand experience that relates almost too perfectly to his character on 9/9.
This is a secret.
Speaking of Terry the artist, in an early episode in Season 1, we see him create an amazing portrait of Captain Holt. To Amy's confusion, Holt refuses to hang it in his own office, which Amy and Terry take as a bit of an insult. But it turns out that Holt is just too humble to have a portrait of himself hanging in his own office. That's not to say that it was thrown out, as anytime we see into his husband Kevin's office in the following seasons, the portrait can be seen, hanging proudly in the background. It might not be a big surprise to anyone that the strongest thing about Brooklyn Nine-Nine is the ensemble when you take a quick look at creator Michael Schur's resume. To start, he helmed the American version of The Office, which is undoubtedly one of the greatest workplace comedies ever, but it doesn't stop there. He also gave us Parks and Recreation, The Good Place, produced the first season of Master of None, and the cult hit of The Comeback, and wrote for a few years on Saturday Night Live. Suffice it to say, if anyone knows how to bring together a group of oddballs, throw them into a seemingly boring work environment, and make comedy gold, it's Mike Schur. We all know that Gina has been a member, or in her words, the star of a number of dance troupes over the years, from Dancy Reagan to Floorgasm. But it is perhaps the most surprising to learn that one cast member is part of a dance troupe in real life, and no, it's not Chelsea Peretti. It's actually Stephanie Beatriz, in a move that would make her character Rosa Diaz roll her eyes so hard they would never come back. While the writers of Brooklyn Nine-Nine are clearly masters of creating hilarious and heartfelt storylines and dialogue, what you might not have realized is that there's actually a lot of improvising that goes on the set. In fact, it's built into the scripts. With a handful of actors to work with like they do, it would be crazy not to let them play around with their lines. The way it usually goes is that they'll cover a scene as written a couple of times, and then let the actors do a take with the freedom to make their lines their own, to see if they can come up with things that are even funnier. Hollywood is a weird place, where almost everything you see isn't actually real. A very clear example of this might be the fact that a show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine that is so centered around New York City is actually shot in Los Angeles. That's right, whenever you see Jake and Rosa outside in their heavy leather jackets and jeans, they're actually walking around outside in the Los Angeles heat. But while they may have constructed the inside of the precinct inside of a studio lot, the exteriors are actually a real working police station, and some wide shots of the building are the actual 78th precinct in New York City. The creators of the show did want the policing that the characters do to be as authentic as possible, so instead of just working with a stunt coordinator to make it look good, they sent all of the actors to do some real-life police training before they began shooting. Part of the structure of the show is that aside from all of their goofy shenanigans, and maybe not including Hitchcock and Scully, all of the cops and detectives in 9/9 are actually very good at their jobs. They did a boot camp with the Glendale Police Department and learned the ropes, which included holding and firing guns, arrest procedure, and so on in order to lend as much authenticity to the show as they could.
Made me look away from my phone. Better pray I didn't miss a text.
Gina has claimed to be right about pretty much everything, which usually works out in her favor. In a Season 5 episode, Charles wants to join a group chat with the rest of the gang, but we find out that he is pretty much the worst texter of them all. So much so that Gina says that she would rather be hit by a bus than be in a text chain with him. Well, at the very end of the episode, right after reading a text from Charles, a buzz comes from out of nowhere and hits Gina! Those Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans who were born after 1990 might have missed one big pop culture reference hiding in plain sight. While they don't appear very often, we know all about Terry's kids. He is a very loving, very devoted father and makes sure that all of his babies come first.
The fairy prince's castle has defeated me.
But that doesn't mean that his cop work isn't important to him too. In fact, it's so important that he named his twin daughters Cagney and Lacey. If you're too young to get the reference, Cagney and Lacey were a pair of female detectives who hunted criminals on the streets of New York in the 1980s. It probably won't surprise you to learn that Andre Bauer, who plays Captain Holt, is a classically trained dramatic actor. He graduated from the extremely prestigious Juilliard School in New York City, where he studied the classics like Shakespeare and Chekhov. We actually couldn't believe that Brooklyn Nine-Nine was the very first chance that Bauer had to work on a comedy. Before the show, he had only played very serious, dramatic roles, and boy are we glad that he got the chance to try out the other side. He says that the key to Holt's humor is that Holt doesn't actually think he's funny at all and always has the most serious intentions.
From now on, call me Velvet Thunder.
We mentioned before that sometimes the writers like to pull things from the real lives of the actors to add to their characters. Amy is a notoriously bad dancer, though she would never admit to it. The episode where she has a dance-off with her brother, played by Lin-Manuel Miranda, really hammers that point home. But in reality, Melissa is an excellent dancer who trained for many years. She even taught dance classes before her acting career took off. It just goes to show how good of an actor she is, because we truly believe that both she and Amy really don't have the moves. Most of us can't imagine anyone else in any of the roles that we've come to know and love, with Andy Samberg at the center of it all. But actually, Samberg almost turned down the role that would go on to become his most beloved. See, Andy had just spent 7 years of his life on one of the most grueling TV show experiences an actor can have, Saturday Night Live. While the show was obviously equally rewarding, he was just completely exhausted by the end of it and wanted to stick to the slightly more relaxed schedule of feature films. But when he was sent an early script for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he knew it was way too good to pass up and signed on. We've talked before about the show's incredible attention to detail, and there's one more example of that we just love too much not to include here. So if you remember all the way back to season 1, when Amy and Jake have the bet going over who can make the most arrests. If Amy wins, she gets Jake's beloved car, and if Jake wins, he gets to take Amy on a date. Well, spoiler alert, Jake winds up winning and taking Amy on what is supposed to be a terrible date. It starts out with him sending her a blue dress to wear that he says reminds him of his first teenage crush. Well, seasons later, we see a flashback of Jake's bar mitzvah where his crush, Jenny Gildenhorn, is seen wearing the exact same dress. Well done, costume department! In season 1, we get to see a little bit of what would become an ongoing rivalry between the police department and the fire department, led by their captain, Patton Oswalt. In an episode, the two squads face off against each other in a football tournament, which we assume is supposed to be fun, but becomes fiercely competitive right off the bat. Unsurprisingly, Terry is the best athlete among them, even if he is a bit of a showboat. We were surprised to learn that this is all a nod to the fact that Terry Crews actually had a career in professional football before he became an actor, where he played for the NFL for several years. While most TV shows have to fight tooth and nail to even get to the development stage, let alone shooting a pilot, let alone having that pilot get picked up for more episodes and not cancelled right away, Brooklyn Nine-Nine has never really been like most TV shows. We talked before about how Mike Schur has something of the Midas touch when it comes to creating TV comedies, so when he approached a few different networks with the idea of a Parks and Recreation style show but with police officers in New York, everybody lost their minds. An intense bidding war was started over who would get to produce the soon-to-be hit, with Fox winning in the end. Weirdly, they actually tried to cancel the show after 5 incredibly successful seasons, but it was saved by NBC and remains on the air. Gina is notorious for always being on her phone, especially when she has a pile of work to do. But she's not the only one who has a bit of an addiction to her smartphone. At the end of season 1, we find out that none other than Captain Holt is totally addicted to a game called Quasi cupcakes. And it's Gina who helps him overcome it. While it might have started out as a parody of the ever-popular Candy Crush, what you might be surprised to learn is that now you can actually download Quasi cupcakes and become addicted to it just like the Captain and Gina. When Amy and Jake finally went out on their first real non-bet date, they had decided to take things slow as to not make the whole working together while dating situation awkward. But then at dinner, they realized they didn't quite know how to interact in this entirely new way. So, what was the solution? Well, shots, of course. You might remember that all the way back in season 2, Gina stated that Amy has different levels of inebriation, from spaced out to loud to dancing and then to very, very friendly. Well, Amy and Jake each ordered 4 shots, and that whole plan about taking things slow went, well, right out the window. If that wasn't enough to solidify that Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of the best comedies on TV, we don't know what will. Did we miss any great details that you think we should know? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe on your way out to keep up with the latest from Screen Rant. We hope you had fun watching.